What's up, Rockfin? It's been a while. Did you miss me? I missed you guys. I don't know what's going on with this trippy lighting, but I think we're gonna go with it. It's definitely a vibe. And today we're going to be talking about Secret Destiny of America. It is a election year, so we're gonna be getting into the history of America. We did a great show with BLA on this Lost Symbol by Dan Brown. That was a lot of fun. And we're also going to be doing the secret architecture of Washington, D.C. right here on Rockfin very soon. The very next show is going to be that show. But today we're going to be talking about the great Manly P. Hall and the Secret Destiny of America, or as Jay likes to call him, Manly P. Hole. So anybody who's interested in esoteric, secret societies, magic, anything like that, is going to come across Manly P. Hall. He's probably one of the most prolific writers on all of the subjects that we discuss here. He has a very generous view of the secret societies and the Great White Brotherhood. Some takes that we don't really adhere to. Manly P. Hall was a very smart person. He learned so much about Masonry that they made him an honorary 33rd degree Mason. He had a very interesting life. We can go into that some other time when we have some more time to go over just Manly P. Hall's life. It was very interesting, but most of his research or his life rather was financed by an oil baroness from Ventura who financed his entire career of research and the buying of secret esoteric books for his library, which I have been to in Los Angeles. The Philosophical Research Society is there. It's a very interesting esoteric place, lots of symbolism going on. So if you've never been to that point of interest, then go check it out. It's really a lot to look at, a lot of books, a lot of symbols and artwork if you are interested in this stuff. So today, all about America, the Secret Destiny of America and America's assignment with destiny. So these were some lectures that became books. This book came from a lecture from 1942. So that is the beginning of the compilation of the information that is in this book. So the first chapter is the origin of the democratic ideal. So he posits that world democracy was the secret dream of the great classical philosophers. Thousands of years before Columbus, they were aware of the existence of our Western Hemisphere and selected it to be the site of the philosophic empire. Now, this is interesting because lots of sites don't get as much attention as you think they would, especially the Grand Canyon. So there's something really weird going on in the Grand Canyon. That could be a whole show of its own too. But they're finding lots of evidence that it was visited by, there's Egyptian stuff there, there's Viking stuff there. It's just a big mystery. So he's saying that the Western Hemisphere was sort of set apart by the secret societies as a place where they could bring about their new Atlantis. And we're going to be talking about Atlantis. There's a whole chapter on that in 1 second. So the Western Hemisphere is going to be the new philosophic empire. The brilliant plan of the ancients has survived our time, he thinks, and will continue to function until the great work is accomplished. The American nation desperately needs a vision of its own purpose. So why do they always say our democracy is in jeopardy? Our democracy, it's almost like a cult, and we're going to be looking at it in that way. That it is not the only form of government that will work. Any form of government without Christ is going to be corrupt, and any form of government with Christ is going to flourish and thrive, even if it is, say a monarchy or something like that. So he thinks that all of these great men of antiquity have been working in secret to make this utopia for us. And it's just, going swimmingly, which is, you know, sounds really stupid because things are, worse than ever here in America. And if there's one thing I know about people and men in particular, is if they're doing something good, praiseworthy, virtuous, you're going to hear about it, okay? They're not going to keep it secret for generations and have secret societies and secret meetings to do a bunch of good things, okay? That's ludicrous to think that working in secret for the betterment of mankind is a thing. It's not a thing, okay? If a guy does something good, even if he's on a desert island all by himself, okay, he's going to write it down and send out a message in a bottle and try and get some kind of, recognition for that good thing. So people are not working in the shadows in secret to make a utopia for all of us. It's just not happening. So he says, world democracy was the secret dream of the great classical philosophers thousands of years before Columbus. Yeah, they were aware of our Western Hemisphere. So he goes on to say, oh, here's the drawing that he has. By preserved symbols, we can know that is from remote past, from the deep shadows of the medieval world, as well as from the early struggles of more modern times, that the power of American democracy has come. So here's one of the first drawings he has about the idea of America. And the idea that America is going to be a leader of the world stage. So he is talking about how to set up a new order of world ethics firmly established on the foundation of democratic idealism. He says they are recognizing, excuse me, the necessity of conceiving the world as one interdependent structure. So here we have the setting up the one world government, setting up the one world religion, the one world philosophy, the one world currency. He thinks that all of this will lead an end to war and discord, okay? So he admits that, the majority of mankind is selfish and provincial, and this is why he thinks that we need these secret great men working in behind the scenes for us, because we're just all selfish and provincial. We're just the profane. We're not initiated into these great societies of super thinkers. He says, it will not be possible to build an enduring peace until the average man has been convinced that personal selfishness is detrimental to personal happiness and personal success. It must be shown that self-seeking has gone out of fashion and that the world is moving on to a larger conception of living. So this is just something that's going to be twisted. Like in the future, they're going to say, oh, you want to own property? That's selfish. You want to get married? That's selfish. You want to have kids? They're already saying that. If you want to have children, that's selfish. So in his mind, getting rid of individuality is the answer to the problem of selfishness. Wars, depressions, crimes, dictators, and their oppressions are the symptoms giving clear indication of a greater ailment. He thinks this is the selfishness of the average person. So the point that man is physical is obvious, but he's also mental, emotional, spiritual, and he has a soul. Only when equal consideration is given to each of these elements of man's nature will he arrive at the solutions for the disasters into which men and nations precipitate themselves. Like I said, he has a high opinion of the Great White Brotherhood. And he thinks that, all of these lofty ideals that they put forth in the low levels of masonry is the foundation that these ideas are set on. He says man's need is for the idealistic content of his nature to be properly nourished, then his whole consciousness will impel him to right action, and then no more will our laws fail, treaties be broken, and the rights of man stand violated. So he's thinking that if you just educate people enough, that they'll be good, and that's not the mankind's problem is spiritual, it's not intellectual, and that's the only way that we are going to become better is recognizing that you can't educate someone into being virtuous. So he admits on the very first chapter that the American democracy is part of the universal plan. So is this a good plan or a bad plan? We're going to find out. Thousands of years before the beginning of the Christian era, many enlightened thinkers discovered that the will of God, as expressed through nature in the affairs of men. So he is very much of the natural law class of thinking. He says there exists in the world today and has existed for thousands of years a body of enlightened humans united in what might be termed the order of the quest. So keep that in mind. You're going to hear that over and over, order of the quest. And that these men have decided that civilization has a secret destiny. Okay, some of these men he's included in here are Pythagoras, Plato, Aristotle, Buddha, Jesus, and Mohammed, among the greatest names. And the world democracy was the secret dream of all of these great classical philosophers. He says these ancient scholars bound themselves with certain mystic ties into a broad co-fraternity. In Egypt, Greece, India, and China, the state mysteries came into existence. He says that philosophy set up its house in the world to free men by freeing them of their own inordinate desires and ambitions. It saw selfishness as the greatest crime against the common good, for selfishness is natural to all who are untutored. Yes, selfishness is a huge problem, but what they are going to be identifying as being selfish in the future is not true. If you want to have a monogamous relationship with a beautiful woman and you don't want to share her, then you're going to be labeled as selfish. And this is actually in Brave New World too, the book by oh my gosh, Brave New World, Aldous Huxley. Yeah. So chapter 2, the world's first Democrat. Who do you think that would be? The leader who had the first social consciousness in the administration of a nation, he thinks, was the Pharaoh of Egypt, Akhenaten. Born several thousand years too soon, he was the first realist in democracy, the first humanitarian, the first internationalist. He saw that the duty of the ruler is to protect for all the right to live well, to think, to dream, to hope, and to aspire. For his dream of the brotherhood of man, he cheerfully gave his life. So here he has Akhenaten and his family sitting on the throne of the world. Now, he's a very interesting case study in his own self. Akhenaten threw Egypt on its head when he came to power. He says, we're not worshiping all of these different gods. We're worshiping one God, and the one God is called the Aten. That's why he's Akhenaten, not Akhenamun. He is a monotheist. He's claimed to be the world's first monotheist, and he said we are worshiping one God, and that is going to be symbolized by the sun. And so they are drawing a lot of principles from the time of Akhenaten. And interestingly, the Rosicrucians also venerate Akhenaten as one of them as an ancient thinker. So that line of thinking also goes back very far to Egypt and to Akhenaten. So he's saying an isolationist is a menace to himself and others. Akhenaten is referred to as the first civilized human being. He was married in his 12th year to a 10-year-old Egyptian girl of noble birth named Nefertiti. During the reign of Akhenaten, Queen T, brilliant and capable, had recognized before her son reached his majority that in him were qualities more divine than human. So his mom was Queen T, his wife was Nefertiti, and his son was probably one of the most famous Egyptian discoveries of all time, King Tutankhamun. So the son became the actual ruler, Akhenaten, in his 18th year. His reign extended for 17 years. He opposed his will to the priesthood of Amun-Ra. In the midst of this conflict, he proclaimed a new spiritual dispensation, and to escape his enemies, he built a new capital city 160 miles up the Nile from Cairo, and his new faith was called Atonism. So as a new high priest of his new religion, Amenhotep IV, or Akhenaten, changed his name because the older name included the word Amen, and that is the faith that he was rejecting. So they are venerating him as one of the first pacifists, the first realist, the first monotheist, the first Democrat, the first heretic, the first humanitarian, the first internationalist, and the first person known to attempt to found a religion. And they are saying that he was born out of due time several thousand years too soon. So from very early on, Akhenaten devoted his life to the perfection of his mystical doctrine in the city, which he had built for the ever-living God. And I always liked this, I don't know why, but in the carvings and stelas of Akhenaten and the Aten, you're always going to find the sun and the rays, and then at the bottom of these little rays, where can you see? Okay, they're little hands. So they would say that the sun's rays come down and, like massage you a little bit or caress you with the hands. And it certainly does kind of feel like that. It feels really good when you're laying out getting a tan and stuff. If you don't stay out too long, you do feel a lot better when you let the sun caress you like that. So to Akhenaten, God was not a mighty warrior ruling over Egypt, speaking through oracles of priests like the Amun religion. He was not a supreme being flying through the air in a war chariot, leading armies of destruction. Aton, according to Akhenaten, was a gentle father who loved all his children of every race and nation and desired for them that they should live together in peace and comradeship. So even more, God, the Aten, had created all the lesser creatures. The Aten, or the Aton, was the father of all beasts, fishes, flowers, insects. So he's a little closer to the God of the Bible than, let's say, Ra or someone like that. So, like a lot of religious leaders, Akhenaten accepted the social problem of life as part of religion. He could not accept the inequalities of birth, wealth, or physical estate as a justification for men persecuting each other and exploiting each other. They say that Akhenaten was the only pharaoh in the history of Egypt who chose to be depicted with his arm around his wife and his little daughters playing around him or seated on his lap. So he seems kind of like, a chill guy, a good start. Maybe, I don't know if he was influenced by Hebrew religion or anything at that time. That's a really good trail or thread to follow. Like, how did Akhenaten come to these realizations that God was a loving father and the creator of all things? Very, very interesting. So here we're off on a start. It doesn't sound so bad, right? World's first Democrat was monotheist Akhenaten. Then we go westward to ocean travel to the earthly paradise. So from Plutarch's description of voyages, it can be calculated that our great continent in the Western Hemisphere was visited by the ancient Greeks and not only reached our shores, but explored part of the Great Lakes area. Under a thin veil of symbolism, they perpetuated in mythology their knowledge of our land, which they call blessed. The area was anciently set apart for coming generations in the great human experiment of the democratic commonwealth. So he's saying that we were visited by the Greeks and they had a far better knowledge of geography and popular opinion than today would indicate. So the classical civilizations concealed most of their learning under legends, myths, and allegories, and these have long been mistakenly accepted as the literal beliefs of the people. So he's saying a great continent in the Western Hemisphere was also known to the ancient Greeks and also to the Egyptians and the Chinese. A lot of people think this was Atlantis, and they're kind of going back and forth. Is this North America or is this Atlantis? So one of the Ptolemies of Egypt built a ship large enough to have an orchard of fruit trees on the deck, together with swimming pools and fountains stocked with live fish. That sounds crazy. That sounds like those cruise liners are big enough to have fruit forests. So he says that Greeks not only reached the coast of America, but explored the St. Lawrence River and part of the Great Lakes area. And here he has some maps and the narrative of Plutarch and their voyages here. So anybody who's, like I said, starting to look into esoteric and symbolism, you're going to want to start with Secret Teachings of All Ages, because that is a really good overview of all of the different esoteric schools. And, you've got Greece in there, you've got Egypt, you've got all of the stories. Some of the editions of Secret Teachings even have giant full color plates of original artwork that was done by Manly P. Hall. And we talk about that sometimes. We were just discussing in one of our live streams on YouTube about the Faustian bargain, and he has a really good painting in Secret Teachings of the magician conjuring Mephistopheles. So the ancients assigned to each country the star groups which were above that country's particular area of land. In the arrangement preserved in the writings of Aratus of Sole, the constellation of the eagle spread its wings across North America, the serpent winds his coil over Mexico and Central America, and the dragon floats in the sky above Japan and China. So he's saying that we get our animal mascots from astrology, which is, I would say that was correct. So we've got an eagle for North America, we've got a serpent for Central America, and then in the east they have the dragon. So the constellation of the Great Bear is in the sky over Russia, and since time immemorial, the bear that walks like a man has been accepted symbol of the Russian state. So then he goes on to talk about the Greeks, and the golden fleece was in reality a parchment on which was written the secret of human immortality. He's saying we now have in America enshrined in the Congressional Library a golden fleece, the American Declaration of Independence, that magic document written by great men and their magical, mystical constitution. Not that it's a terrible thing, but it's not the answer to everything. But he's saying the American Declaration of Independence, written on the skin of an animal and preserved as the magic formula of human hope. Now, that's not true. The magic formula of human hope is the gospel and Jesus Christ and the church. It's not the Declaration of Independence, even though it has served as an okay form of government. It has given us a lot of freedoms and elevated humanity to a certain extent. It's definitely not the gospel. So another golden fleece he's talking about is the Magna Carta, the English Bill of Human Rights, which was inspired behind was the inspiration behind our American Declaration of Independence. So these are the basic texts of modern democracy. He says it's the rise of democratic dream in Europe that supplied the beginning of Western civilization. Here, talking about America, was a virgin continent populated only by non-nomadic Indian tribes, a vast territory suitable in every way for the great human experiment of the democratic commonwealth. And yes, we did get many of our ideas from the Native Americans, and they were very involved in the influencing the founding fathers about how to set up a society that would benefit a lot of people. Here he says, wise men, the ancients believed, were a separate race, and to be born into this race was necessary to develop the mind to a state of enlightened intelligence. There is a second birth, which is not an accident, but is the consequence of a proper intent. Now he's talking more like Christian lingo, like born again. He's saying by the second birth, man is born by enlightened intelligence out of a nation and out of a race into an international nation and an international race. Surprise, surprise. It's all about globalism. They will someday inherit the earth. Unless a man be born again by enlightenment, he shall not be a part of the philosophic empire. So here we are already pretty much antagonistic to the gospel, saying that it is not by faith in Christ that we are saved and born again. It is by being intelligent and enlightened and learned and philosophical. Right? So now we're on chapter 4, the first election of lawmakers. There is an ancient story about Solon of Athens who visited Egypt. He was taken by the priest to an underground river to view two columns on which were inscribed the laws given in olden times. Now, when they talk olden times, what's older than Egypt is Atlantis. So the laws were given in olden times for the government of nations, not made by man, but as the will of eternal nature. And this is kind of shadowy, but there's his picture of old Solon finding the two pillars of civilization right here in Egypt that they're saying lasted from the old-timey times of Atlantis. So Solon of Athens freed the debtor's person to reform the institution of debt slavery. He instituted the selection of juries by lot, with all citizens participating, and he gave the voting franchise to all taxpayers alike, thus beginning national democracy 600 years before Christ. When he later journeyed to Egypt, he there learned of the first war of conquest in the story of the lost Atlantis and became acquainted with the imperishable laws of the government of nations. So Solon was a very great statesman of ancient Greece. And what problems were they having back then? They were debt slavery, and tax paying, and corrupt politicians. So he thought that he could go to Egypt and get some wisdom on these problems plaguing his society. He was known as the greatest statesman of the Greek world, and handling these age-old problems, he was made to be a leader of the state with the title Archon. So if you study Gnosticism at all, you'll know what an Archon is. It's basically just, in Gnosticism, it's a demon, but here it's like a ruler, like a governor or something like that, a principality. So to get rid of these problems of debt slavery, and stuff like that, his first move was to attack the old Attic law of debt, which he believed lay at the source of the public distress. So he abolished this law, and which was a law that permitted loans on the security of the debtor's person. And he thought that would help a lot. So he visited Egypt to search for larger wisdom. He went to the priest at Sais. I don't even know how to pronounce that. Sais or Sais. S-A-I-S. It's the cult of Isis at Sais. So the priest of Sais who served the shrine to the goddess Isis, one night they led Solon through the long dark passageway of the temple. They came to a subterranean chamber hewed from the living rock. Through these chambers flowed a river into the underworld. And that is where he found the two tall columns that glistened. They appeared to be made of some strange metal, covered with curious writing in an unknown language. So they're telling the story of Atlantis. Once long ago, there existed on Earth a vast empire of power which extended over every corner of the world. It was ruled over by 7 kings who were the descendants of Neptune, God of the seas. Now, I've heard 7 kings, I've heard 10 kings, so I don't know which story we're going by. So Manly P. Hall says 7 kings here. He says, then came the fatal day when the 7 kings of the island were in disobedience to the laws of the gods and resolved to conquer the whole earth. Thus it came that war came into being, for before that time there had been no strife among men. So this is also like a Edenic parable too, Atlantis was. We all know that story. The gods were angry at the 7 kings. They caused the earthquakes, and the land of the west vanished into the sea in a single night. 60 million people died, and the Atlantic Empire was forgotten. So from these ancient columns, said the high priest of Isis at Sais, we have read the laws that were given in olden times for the government of nations. So when Solon returned to Greece, it was his intention to take the story of the Atlantic Empire and develop it into a great epic poem. So he told the story in the fullest detail to his close friend, Dropus, who recited to his son, Critias. And when he was 19, Critias communicated the narrative to his grandson of the same name, who later became a disciple of Socrates. So that is how we get the story of Atlantis, and the dialogue itself was just named the Critias. So then chapter 5, he's talking about the ancient League of Nations. He says, a description of the lost Atlantis was written by Plato. It introduces the league formed by 10, now here's 10 again. 10 benevolent kings who ruled over the lesser nations and the 3 continents of Europe, Asia, and Africa, and who bonded themselves by oath to obey the divine laws of enduring empire. This was the philosophic democracy, with all men having the right to become wise through self-discipline and self-improvement, thus achieving the only aristocracy recognized by natural law. The Atlantis story continues to the later decision of the kings to use their united power to enslave all the peoples of the earth, and the consequent destruction of Atlantis by earthquake and fire. Interpreted politically, it is the story of the breaking up of the ideal pattern of government. So this is a political fable, but the philosopher Plato saw the account of the fall of Atlantis as an admirable opportunity to summarize his convictions concerning government and politics. So the kings were descendants of Neptune or Poseidon, and they're talking about in the capital city of Atlantis stood the temple of Poseidon, and in it a golden figure of the god. Here's the 10 kings again. 10 kings of Atlantis should not take arms against each other for any reason, but of course, as you do, they did, and then they were destroyed. So Plato describes the government of the Golden Age, or the Age of Atlantis, in which men live on earth according to the laws of heaven. So Europe, Asia, and Africa, the League of the 10 Kings is the cooperative commonwealth of mankind, the natural and proper form of human government. The Atlantis, therefore, is the archetype or the pattern of right government, which existed in ancient days but was destroyed by selfishness and ignorant men. There's those selfish people again who don't want to be communist, basically. So Plato was a monarchist and by philosophic conviction, but his ideal king was a philosopher king. Jade knows so much about Plato. If you ever want to know about all of these ancient philosophers, he did a great series for Richard Grove on Grand Theft World about the introduction to philosophy, and it was superb. Like, if you don't think that philosophy is important, then you're crazy, because it's the foundation of how you learn. So in these ideals, Plato would say the king was a father of the people. He was supposed to be descended of a divine race. That is, he belonged to the order of the illumined. So they don't say Illuminati, but they are talking about the illumined ones. Plato's monarchy was therefore a philosophic democracy, talking about self-discipline, self-improvement, and this superiority was the only aristocracy recognized by natural law. So you could become a philosopher king yourself with the proper motivation and education. So here then is the pattern of world government to ensure the prosperity in their minds of all the peoples of the world. So the citizens, they think in Atlantis were happy. They didn't know poverty. There was world trade. The ships of Atlantean marine traveled the seven seas, bringing rich treasures to the motherland. There was little crime. Arts flourished. Sciences were cultivated. They had great universities. Men had no enemies, and war was unknown. So they think that the god Poseidon was the guardian of the Atlantic Empire, and men followed the occupations which they preferred and lived in a communal existence, together sharing the fruits of their labors. Doesn't that sound nice? That sounds so sweet if we could just all get along and share everything in common and be enlightened, philosophical. Everything would be great. So the fall of Atlantis, they're saying, is the story of how man departed from the perfect pattern of his conduct and was dissolved by selfishness and ambitions. At last, the kings of Atlantis decided to use their common power to enslave all the peoples of the earth. And like we said, this is what caused the destruction of Atlantis, and can be interpreted politically as the breaking up of the ideal pattern of government. Chapter 6, a Roman project to give rulership to the wise. So the Platonic point of view was envisioned by Plotinus to take form as a philosopher's city, establishment of which was approved by the Roman emperor and the noblest experiment in time. So after Plato's death, Plotinus, according to Manly P. Hall, was the greatest of the Neoplatonists, discussed the problem of state with the Emperor Gallienus of Rome. They're talking about in times of stress or danger, each nation could send to his community those of its citizens whose mental excellence would entitle them to a world citizenship. So remember, anybody could become a Rhodan citizen, just like anybody could become an American citizen through the proper channels, right? It doesn't have to be by birth. You could be a Roman even if you were born in Britain. So here, protected from all outside interference, they would be allowed to continue the various works of their individual lives. It is safe to predict that such a philosopher's city would ultimately be the most practical and certain instrument for accomplishing a world point of view in all departments of human thinking. So when we do the book Secret Architecture of Our Nation's Capital, we're going to learn that Washington, D.C. is modeled after ancient Rome and the democratic ideal back then. And it was even on 7 hills, just like Rome is on 7 hills. The architecture obviously is like, Greco-Roman. And they even had a eternal flame, a fire down in the basement of the Capitol building, that was tended to like the fire of the Vestal Virgins in Rome. So these unions of superior intellects, he says, when the greater parts of learning exercise dominion over the human mind, world peace will be more than the substance of things hoped for. He says, when Plato dreamed of his wise man's world, he set the chief place in it aside to be the temple of the ever-living God. So we're getting philosophical here. We're trying to have all of the benefits of a high society, a learned society, a peaceful society without Christ, and that's why it's never going to work, because it wasn't the 10 kings of Atlantis that passed down, things like dignity and rights and being an heir to some kind of kingdom of heaven. Chapter 7, the democratic tradition preserved by the secret societies. So for more than 3,000 years, secret societies, he says, have labored to create the background of knowledge necessary to the establishment of an enlightened democracy among the nations of the world. The Greek Dionysians were social and political temple builders, known as the collegians in later Rome. The rise of the Christian church brought persecution of the classical intellectual patterns ideology. Here, now we're getting to the point. Classical Dionysian thinkers were doing great until here comes the church trying to persecute and keep everybody down, driving the guilds into greater secrecy. He says, but they have continued searching for human happiness under a variety of rituals and symbols, and they still exist as the order of the quest. So this is really freaking funny to me, that he thinks that Dionysians were like some kind of super smart, philosophical, peaceful, prosperous people. This was a sex cult, okay? This was a cult for revelry. It was a cult for debauchery. It was all about the Greek god Pan. It was about cross-dressing. It was about getting drunk. It was about taking drugs, tripping, orgies. I mean, this is where you get the word bacchanal from, because Dionysus became Bacchus in Rome, and the word bacchanalia. And I mean, just the whole idea of a drunken orgy is Dionysian. So it's really stupid to think that this was some club of great men who were working in secret to make everything better for mankind. It's just preposterous. So this democratic world state, the background of knowledge, he says, necessary to establish the enlightened democracy among all nations has been carried on for many hundreds of years by secret societies. Yeah, so maybe they are descended from Dionysus. Actually, they are, because Masons call themselves, or they say that they are descended from the Dionysian artificers. But they're all getting drunk in secret and having drunken orgies for the enlightenment of mankind. So he says the secret societies have had concealment and protection as the first purpose of their existence. Yes, we have to conceal all the enlightened thinkers and the people who are doing great works from those awful Christians who just want to hold everybody back and oppress, because God hates fun and progress. So we got to go underground, keep it secret. So here he has a little picture. He's got the Rosicrucian cross. He's got the Freemason working tools. He's got some kind of chalice, maybe the Holy Grail. And then he's got the Hebrew letter right there. All these secret society, got to stay secret because the Christians will ruin everything. So these members have some special knowledge. He says a second purpose for the secret societies was to create a mechanism for the perpetuation from generation to generation of policies, principles, or systems of learning confined to a limited group of selected and initiated persons. Only the special people can learn the true secrets of freedom and enlightenment and philosophy. He said it is beyond question that the secret societies of all ages have exercised a considerable degree of political influence. No SHIT, right? No duh. So he starts talking about Solomon, the king of Israel, who's building the temple. He sent to Tyre to hire Hiram Abiff, who was a master of the Dionysian artificers. Here we go again. He says, it is certain that the Dionysians practiced secret rites and worshiped the gods under geometric symbolism. They possessed a body of lore which included mathematical secrets of proportion and design, certain knowledge concerning universal dynamics, and a philosophical, religious, moral, and political conviction concerning the perfecting of human society. They refer to the ignorant and uncultured humans as a rough ashlar. That is the uncut stone. So the temple upon which they labored was the temple of the living God, which is a body, your own body, in their philosophy, one person is a tiny god. It's true they did keep these mathematical secrets. Pythagoreanism was one of those, and that's where we get the pentagram. So there's nothing wrong with geometry. There's nothing wrong with mathematics. There's nothing wrong with architecture, but keeping them secret and trying to devise secret societies to rule over ignorant masses with these special worlds of knowledge is not a vibe. So part of the Dionysian movement migrated eastward to build the Empire of Islam, he says, with each stone in mosque and palace bearing the mark of the master masons. Now, that's interesting. So now we've got a connection to Islam, to Dionysus. He says, in the early development of Europe, the Dionysians became the guild of the cathedral builders. They signed each stone with the secret symbols of their cult, and into the intricate carvings of church and chapel, they worked the old pagan figures and designs. Now we're getting into Holy Blood, Holy Grail territory. We're getting into Dan Brown, Da Vinci Code. I don't know what to think of this, really. Like, he's saying that secret societies are building these Christian cathedrals and usurping some kind of spiritual power by saying we still worship the old pagan gods by proof of their symbols, figures, and designs. He's saying alchemy became science. That's true. So alchemists came into being, mystic chemists. Chemistry was the seeking of the elixir of life, or the philosopher's stone. That's also a Harry Potter book, right? The universal medicine, or the agent for the transmutation of metals. So he's saying that he likes to wax with his own philosophies a lot, and he takes these old principles and he's saying he likes to like distill it down to very easily agreeable and digestible platitudes. So he says the elixir of life is truth itself. The wise man's stone is science. The universal medicine is wisdom. The agent of transmutation of metals is the pattern of the universal state. And then he actually goes into the Illuminati. He says in Italy, the Illuminati sought for the pearl of great price hidden in the deep waters of moral corruption. He talks about the Knights of the Holy Grail. Christian and Jewish Kabbalists pondered the letters of the scriptures to find the secrets. The Rosicrucian in their hidden houses. And all of these groups within groups make up this invisible college of good guys. He calls the Order of the Quest again. And he thinks that we are indebted to these brothers of the quest for our science, arts, crafts today. Now, it's true, Isaac Newton was a Kabbalist, alchemist, magician. And so we do get a lot of our modern day discoveries from these ancient people who thought that they were doing magic. So he says, for more than 3,000 years, secret societies have labored to create the background of knowledge necessary for the establishment of an enlightened democracy among the nations of the world. And this is just now the New World Order in the age of Aquarius. So then we are coming up to 15th, 16th, 17th century. We're talking about Columbus. I guess that would be 15th century. Chapter 8, a new identity for Christopher Columbus. So this is where it's going to get kind of weird. Here's the picture of Columbus. And the cipher of Columbus is generally interpreted Salve Christus Maria Josephus Christophrenes. It was usual to build personal ciphers upon dates, and the 7 large letters above the signature of Christopher Columbus are read according to the medieval system, and and the date 1420 results. The X appears to be a double letter. Anyways, he's just thinking that Christopher Columbus was one of these Order of the Questee guys. And that wasn't his real name because Columbus is also an esoteric thing. Or Columb, the dove. So many scholars were fully aware of the global form of the Earth in the time of Columbus. Sorry, flat earthers, I don't know what's going on, but they're saying it's globe Earth back then. According to early historians, state documents, and his own son was not an Italian of humble station and uneducated, but was a Greek prince. We're talking about Christopher Columbus. A Greek prince with an excellent classical education. It was from a Greek port that he sailed on the celebrated voyage of discovery. He was accompanied by a mysterious stranger. We're going to find mysterious strangers popping up all over the place when we're talking about the Revolutionary War and the creation of the Great Seal and the signing of the Declaration of Independence. So here is another mysterious stranger on the voyage of Christopher Columbus, which has suggested that Columbus was an agent of the Society of Unknown Philosophers. The pattern of the democratic ideal was beginning to assert itself over the tyranny of decadent aristocracy. A new world was necessary for a new idea. When it was necessary, it was discovered. So, yeah, 20 cities, he says, claim Christopher Columbus as a native. So this is getting as convoluted as where was Walt Disney born? So where's Christopher Columbus born? 1937 book titled Christopher Columbus Was a Greek. The real name they're saying was Prince Nicolaus. Oh man. Ypsilantis? Ypsilantis. Could be. So he points out that the language of the ancient Mayas of the American continent contains many words of pure Greek belonging to the Homeric period, and to quote the book, years ago in the Republic of Uruguay were discovered traces of an army of Alexander the Great, swords and Thors with the inscription Ptolemaios Alexandroi. So he's saying there's much evidence to indicate that Columbus was inspired for his voyages by Plato's account of Atlantis, and maybe that's what he was searching for. But if they knew about the North American continent already, they were probably just like, well, we're going to get into Bacon in a second, Francis Bacon in the New Atlantis. So they are christening North America as the New Atlantis. Talking about spheroid Earth. I don't know. I don't know, man. Could be flat. So here's this stranger again. He says, in browsing among the old records, I have run across a dim figure involved in the life of Columbus, a strange man who seems to have served the explorer in the capacity of counselor. So nothing more has come out to him about this guy. He was not included in the list of passengers. He did not return, but remained in the West Indies. This mysterious stranger is reminiscent of the black-robed man who guided the destiny of Muhammad. Now, what? Who are these unknown, secret, hidden masters? Maybe these are the guys they're talking about in Theosophy. So in Manly P. Hall's opinion, Christopher Columbus was an agent of the Order of the Quest. He says the signature of Columbus, composed of letters curiously arranged and combined with Kabbalistic designs, convey far more than is inherent in the signature of a private citizen. So who was Columbus really? And who are these mysterious men? So now we're getting weird. We're going to Nostradamus. Chapter 9, he says, 11 years after Columbus reached our shores, an extraordinary man was born in France. In adult life, He was both a respected physician and a mystic who was able to write accurately the history of the world to come. There's, no indication at the time that in the Western Hemisphere would arise a great nation, but Dr. Michael Nostradamus saw a civilization established there that would observe on a Thursday, a day to express thanksgiving for freedom of religion, freedom of opportunity, freedom of life. He prophesied this nation would be free itself from the bonds of a mother country, would greatly prosper, would have to fight several wars before becoming a great power of world peace with other nations looking to it for leadership. All that Nostradamus foretold is precisely according to the Platonic tradition. So here, I don't know if you've got any Nostro bros loving the predictions of Nostradamus. I don't know very much about it other than this quick little chapter in this book. But it seems like these shadowy figures always seem to stand behind the men who make history. So 200 years after Nostradamus, the celebrated Illuminist and Rosicrucian man named Comte Saint-Germain remarked that he was one who had assisted Nostradamus in calculation of his remarkable predictions. Now, if you don't know who Saint-Germain is, supposed to be some kind of I want to say vampire, not really vampire, but he is in vampire lore. He is an immortal, we'll call him, who kind of just like keeps popping up at these pivotal points in history. There is a cult for Saint Germain in Mount Shasta, California, and they do a passion play every year of the life of Christ, and Christ is played by a man who calls himself Saint Germain. It gets weird over there. So he's part of this Order of the Quest. Nostradamus was, according to Manly P. Hall, a mystic philosopher, astrologer, alchemist, and Kabbalist. Nostradamus was versed in all the secret lore. It is possible that he included part of the plan of things to come as already well set in the minds and the purposes of his initiates. So he's thinking maybe Nostradamus was in the club. It's a big club and you aren't in it, but Nostradamus is in it. Nostradamus foretold a story of the Blessed Isles, precisely according to the Platonic tradition, and we cannot but wonder if he was party to that tradition and knew exactly what he was talking about. So in the larger picture of the world's future, Nostradamus indicates the coming of the Great League, which they would call the League of Nations or the United Nations, an assembly of world powers, and this would bring an end to barbarism and the beginning of a great world civilization. So are they predicting the future, or do they just know the right people who are making the plans? So the design of utopia. Utopia, utopia, utopia. It's not for everybody, is it? Chapter 10. Sir Thomas More wrote a fable about 400 years ago to set forth the social state of man in a philosophic commonwealth. But so completely has the world missed the entire point that the very word utopia is even today a synonym for optimistic but impractical ideas of reform. And, I mean, yeah, even the word utopia like means no such place, right? So he says Campanella, an Italian philosopher, wrote of the major tragedy in that the subject of statesmanship alone has been neglected as practically every other subject had been, reduced to a science. Government officials, he insisted, should be elected after examination to determine knowledge and fitness. Other people contributed further to utopian literature, and some of them actually sought to Christianize it with the theme for lack of vision, the people perish. So a famous book, Sir Thomas More's Utopia. The entire framework for utopia is borrowed from Plato's Republic. So it's so true when Jay and others talk about Neoplatonism. it is so pervasive in the ideology of so many, many things. So in Utopia, Thomas More presents his philosophical and political conviction in the form of a fable, which sets forth the social state of man in a philosophic commonwealth. They agree that the individual is incapable of the practice of the moral virtues. He must be subjugated to the laws which protect him from himself and protect him from his unwise actions. So the principal purpose of life then is to release oneself from the domination of government by the perfection of personal character. They talk about philosopher kings, the city of the sun. Bocchinelli's satire about utopia is important because it constituted the first published statement of the Society of the Rosicrucians. It points out that first, evils must be recognized, then the public must be educated to assume its proper responsibility in the correction of the evils, and last, public opinion must force the reformation of the state and curb the ambitions of politicians. This goes on to influence the Rosicrucian Manifesto, the authors of The Chemical Marriage of Christian Rosencreutz. The Utopian literature influenced the Christianopolis, or the city of the Christ. Plotinus Christianopolis is Platonopolis, Christianized. Interesting. So here we get into chapter 11, the objective of the secret society. Oh, it's always good. It's always just so many people are planning behind your back to do great things for you. Can't you feel it? Bacon's New Atlantis. One reference to a secret society in Bacon's New Atlantis is scarcely less than a proclamation of the Society of Unknown Philosophers, but has gone unnoticed for 300 years. This fable is of the land of Bensalem, meaning the son of peace, which, with its merchandise, the light of truth, maintained a trade with Atlantis, which was declared to be the same as America. Everything indicates that it was Sir Francis Bacon's dream that the enlarging of the bounds of human empire should be instituted on our own continent, an area peculiarly set aside by nature for the perfection of philosophy and sciences. So the writings of Sir Francis Bacon, he had professional writings, he had literary, and he had philosophical. He wrote The New Atlantis, which forms a kind of blueprint that we were talking about. It's first published in 1627. On the title page is a curious design. He says it shows the figure of an ancient creature representing time, drawing a female figure from a dark cavern. The meaning is obvious. Through time, hidden truths shall be revealed. They talk about something called the College of the 6 Days' Work, a thinly veiled reference to the perfection of human nature through art. So they think as God created the universe in 6 symbolic days, so man, by art, that is philosophy, must create the condition of his own perfection by means of 6 philosophical steps. So again, no mention of redemption through Christ or any type of gnosis of the divine, of God, through anything but studying philosophy. So this college is the secret school according to a divine understanding of causes. Manly P. Hall says, it is safe to assume that these laws, like the whole pattern of the story, were the same set forth by Plato for the government of the wise. Chapter 12, Western culture 1,000 years before Columbus. So now we're getting into some foreign territory, some tribal territory, some South American, Mayan, Mexican. He says, in the Mexican area, the civilization then existing was the most advanced on Earth. The ancient Mayas had massive public buildings and observatories in at least 100 cities, and these were connected by broad, paved highways. Rulers were elected by the common agreement of the people. The Mayas hold the world record for a continued peace of 500 years. That's not true. This has been attributed to their having possessed no monetary symbol or currency for goods exchange. Theirs was the first democratic state on a continent set aside for the perfection of the dream of democracy. Long before the coming of the white man, the spirit of human equality, human cooperation, and freedom of worship had flourished here. So now he's talking about the like Yucatan Peninsula, Guatemala, Honduras, and thinking that the Mayans at the time were the most advanced existing on the earth. Anybody ever seen Apocalypto? That's pretty advanced. He says their written language, more complicated than Chinese, is a type suited to the expression of exact knowledge and the most refined mental and emotional reflexes. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, my writing looks pretty cool. He says they owed their culture's superiority to a mysterious old man who came out of the sea riding on a raft of serpents. And this is Quetzalcoatl, God Quetzalcoatl. His name means the feathered snake or the serpent covered with the plumes of the Quetzal bird. Is also very close to the Asian or Chinese idea of dragons. They say that the feathered snake taught them everything. He instructed them in agriculture, architecture, medicine, science, language, religion, and statesmanship. He ruled over them for a time as a beloved and benevolent priest king. When Cortez reached the coast of Mexico, the Aztec king Montezuma dispatched messengers of the state bearing with them the plumed crown of Mexico. The trusting Aztec thought that Cortez was Quetzalcoatl returned and was ready immediately to surrender the throne. So this kind of reminds me of Dune a little bit with the Bene Gesserit witches who are able to prophesy things because they're the ones setting up the pieces for the prophecy to come true in the future, and maybe not even in their lifetime, but through many generations, this order of the quest is able to present a Messiah because they had first put in the prophecies and they knew how to fulfill them. So maybe this same thing happened here with Cortez and Quetzalcoatl. So as far as we know, the rulers of the Mayans were not hereditary, but were elected for life. The priesthood itself was powerful and benevolent. The religion consisted of a monotheism, the worship of one supreme principle abiding in the sun, and also human sacrifice. Wow. He didn't say that. I said that. Because what are those pyramids for? They were for human sacrifice. So Quetzalcoatl was a kind of messiah who suffered, died, and rose again. His legend is in parallel with the myth of the dying god, very much like Egypt, Greece, and he is wrapping Jesus into this as well. This is, I don't even know what he's like on, because he's saying the Mayans were not a warlike people, and there's no support for popular belief that they were by nature cruel or barbaric. On the altars of their gods, he says, they offered only flowers and fruit. And it was not until the decline of the empire and its domination by less advanced tribes that human sacrifice was only then. And only then, on the rarest occasions, sure. They were communists as well. He says the Mayan nation was a collective commonwealth. They possessed all goods in common. So if we could just do communism right, like those peaceful Mayans with their giant pyramids where you chop off their head and let it roll down the steps, maybe it would be better. He says the first League of Nations was created among the Great Lakes. Remember, we were talking about how they found Greek artifacts in the Great Lakes. First, 5 tribes and later 7 combined their leadership of the brilliant Indian leader Great Rabbit, whose life has descended to us in Longfellow's poem Hiawatha. Then he says, at least 2,000 years before the coming of the white man, the spirit of human equality, human cooperation, and freedom of worship flourished here. So he has nothing but good things to say about the Mayan culture. And only when they were at their most desperate and not in their right mind were they doing human sacrifice, according to Manly People. Chapter 13, Bacon's secret society is set up in America. He says, men bound by secret oath to labor in the cause of world democracy decided that in the American colonies, they would plant the roots of a new way of life. Brotherhoods were established to meet secretly, and they quietly and industriously conditioned America to its destiny for leadership in a free world. Benjamin Franklin, oh, great man. Great man. Benjamin Franklin. Hellfire Club, bodies buried under his house, Gilf Seeker. Benjamin Franklin exercised an enormous psychological influence in colonial politics as the appointed spokesman of the unknown philosophers. He did not make laws, but his words became law. So Manly P. Hall's talking about the promulgation of the Christian faith in the Western Hemisphere in the Virgin Territories. So with the conquistadors came priests eager to convert pagan tribes and nations to the faith of the old world. Here, this is kind of a famous conspiracy picture right here. You've got Bacon and Benjamin Franklin, and Bacon over his shoulder influencing him in the shadows. He says it was due to the zeal of the priests that the libraries of the Mayans were burned and their historical records destroyed. Those nasty priests trying to spread the gospel and just, help people put their sacrifices of fruits and berries and flowers. And yeah, you're going to build a giant pyramid to worship your serpent god, and all you're going to do is bring fruits. And that's not even, that goes against every magical, thing I've ever learned, is that gods want a blood sacrifice. Small g gods, right? So these terrible priests came, they burned all of the peaceful Mayans records just because they're afraid of competition. Here come the French, the Dutch, and the English. The English program was under the direction of Sir Francis Bacon, and it was his genius that gave purpose to the enterprise. It says Bacon did not play a lone hand. He was the head of a secret society, including in its membership the most brilliant intellectuals of his day. Is he going to get into Shakespeare right here? I forgot. So in one of Manly P. Hall's books, I think it's Secret Teachings of All Ages, he's got the there's like a plate of an artwork of Shakespeare, and then like a tissue drawing that you can lay over it that shows you like how similar Shakespeare is to Sir Francis Bacon. So he's saying much of the intolerance of the old world came over to plague the beginnings of the new civilization. Bacon's secret society was set up in America before the middle of the 17th century. Bacon himself had given up all hope of bringing his dream to fruition in his own country, and he concentrated his attention on rooting it in the new world. So this mystic empire of the wise had no national boundaries. Its citizens were made up of men of good purpose. So they're talking about the alchemists, the Kabbalists, the mystics, the Rosicrucians, all those crazy cults that came over, like in the Mayflower days, Plymouth Brethren and the Quakers and the Shakers and uh who's that other guy? Moravians. There's one in 1690, the German pietist theologian Magister Johann Kelpius sailed for America with a group of followers who all practiced mystical and esoteric rites. The pietists settled in Pennsylvania, and their descendants still flourish there. This was in 1940. I don't know if there's any of them left by 1942, but the pietists brought with them the writings of the German mystic Jacob Boehm, where we get the word bohemian, books on magic, astrology, alchemy, and Kabbalah. They had curious manuscripts illumined with strange designs, and their principal text was called an ABC book for young students studying in the College of the Holy Ghost. This looks interesting. So this is like the inner circle. Kelpius was a man of feeble health. After years, he died from hardships and exposures of his religious austerity. That happens to a lot of culty people. Their health suffers because of their weird, I'm thinking like the Kellogg's. If you don't know the story behind Kellogg's cereal, cornflakes were invented by a weird cult that was set up by the Kellogg brothers, and cornflakes are supposed to help you not masturbate, which good intention, but I don't think it's the cornflakes that is going to help with that. For Kelpius, the inner circle of his order was composed entirely of celibates, and as these people died, there was no one to take their place, so his secret society did not survive very long. Then you have the first American gentleman, Benjamin Franklin, the quiet, dignified, scholarly, gentle Franklin, yes. Franklin did pose an enormous psychological influence on the New World. The source of his power lay in the secret societies to which he belonged, and of which he was the appointed spokesman. Franklin was not the lawmaker, but his words became law. We should do a profile on Franklin because he's a freaking character, man. He was like a granny chaser. He was in, I think, the Nine Sisters Lodge. He was in the Hellfire Club. Jay and I did a show a long, long time ago about top 10 cults, and I think we were talking about Benjamin Franklin in that one. Then you have old Grandpa Democracy himself, George Washington. The Apotheosis of Washington, Chapter 14, the prophecy written in the year of Washington's birth. So, Sir William Hope noted the birth overseas of an infant starred by fate to rule both free men and slaves, and named the year of the American Declaration of Independence 44 years before it was signed. He gave in Kabbalistic form the patriot leader's name and the years of his lifetime span. The prophecy also singled out Abraham Lincoln, designated the term of Benjamin Harrison as the one to mark the first century of the new nation's progress. It is a reasonable assumption that the Hope prophecy is a genuine example of foreknowledge of the destiny of the United States. So now he's talking about a little book called Vindication of the True Art of Self-Defense in 1724 by a guy named Sir William Hope. On the blank fly leaves, he says, is written in the hand of Sir William Hope an extraordinary prediction concerning the destiny of the United States of America. It was written, signed, and dated 44 years before the beginning of the Revolutionary War. So if you're interested in this little book by Sir William Hope, he's got some excerpts from this. It's just more Nostradamus kind of Kabbalist crap. I mean, yeah, of course you can predict the future if you're in the club that is making it come to pass. Here's some more unknown figures. The unknown man who designed our flag. They said our flag was worked out in elements of design that provided for gradual modification in the future as the national destiny increased. So yeah, what they're talking about is how you had the navy blue square with a circle of stars in it for the first 13 colonies. They intentionally left that space blank of stars so that they could add more states in the future. It was a learned stranger added by seeming accident to the committee appointed by the Colonial Congress in 1775 who had the foresight to provide the area for the stars in subsequent substitution for the British Union Jack. The design was adopted by General Washington. There is no record that the committee ever made a report to Congress. According to the rules laid down by Francis Bacon for works published under the authority of the Society of Unknown Philosophers, each book must be so marked as to be readily recognizable. The book that tells of the presence of the unknown designer ends with a quotation from Bacon. So they're talking about Robert Allen Campbell's 1890 book called Our Flag, or the Evolution of Stars and Stripes. According to the rules laid down by Sir Francis Bacon, for works published under the authority of the Society of Unknown Philosophers, each book must be marked recognizable by informed, but not conspicuous to those who are not a party to the plan. So here we have some secret codes going on. You've got ciphers, curious headpieces, vignettes, design symbols, figures, or signatures. It's possible the book Our Flag carries such a signature because it ends with the following quotation by Francis Bacon. I'm not going to read that whole thing. But so even the creation of the flag was influenced by shadowy figures that we know nothing about. While at Cambridge, the committee does talk about the flag. The committee men were entertained by a patriotic and well-to-do citizen. At that time, the best room in this gentleman's residence was temporarily occupied by a peculiar old gentleman who they called the professor. He was beyond 70 years of age, but apparently in the prime of his life, he ate no flesh, fish, nor fowl, or any green things, and drank no liquor or wine or ale. His diet consisted of cereals, well-ripened fruit, nuts, tea, and such sweets as honey and molasses. He was well-educated, highly cultured, of extensive as well as varied information, and very studious. He spent most of his time pondering over rare books and ancient manuscripts, which seemed to be deciphering, translating, and rewriting. So is this another Saint Germain character? And I'm not sure if this is the same one they're talking about, but Benjamin Franklin had a roommate, I think that's the professor, who influenced him a lot also. So the committee would meet in the professor's room. George Washington opened the proceedings by asking Benjamin Franklin for his recommendation. Franklin replied by requesting the entire committee listen to the words of his newfound and abundantly honored friend, the professor. Yep, that's him. Who had definite suggestions to make. After the preamble, he says what they call the following extraordinary remarks. He says, the sun of our political air, like the sun in the heavens, is very low in the horizon, just now approaching the winter solstice, which it will reach very soon. But as the sun rises from its grave in Capricorn, mounts toward his resurrection in Aries, and passes onward and upward of his glorious culmination in Cancer, so will our political sun rise and continue to increase in power. So now he's already talking in astrological lore and terms, and also exalting the sun, just like Akhenaten. He says the heat and the power of our starry lion until our colonial sun will be in its glorious exaltation, demanding a place in the governmental firmaments alongside of, coordinate with, and in no wise subordinate to any other son of any nation upon the earth. So it's going to be a huge country born under astrological predictions, guided by unknown men in the order of the quest. And this is going to play out exactly how they want it to, unless we can recognize that Christ is the light of the world, not the sun. Now he's talking about Thomas Paine and the Rights of Man, chapter 16. Here's old Thomas Paine. The crusading of Tom Paine definitely advanced for Americans that secret destiny by which all people shall be free and equal. There is little doubt that he assisted Jefferson in writing the Declaration of Independence. Paine emphasized the necessity of separating the spheres of church and state and government, which we don't necessarily adhere to. It can work, but it is better if the government and the church operates in synergy. Let's see. They preached religious tolerance in a day when the spirit of persecution was still strong, attacked the special privileges of the aristocracy. Only by thousands of years of conditioning can mankind be brought to the perfection state envisioned by this American patriot. So Thomas Paine, of revolutionary days of America and France, he was the son of a hardworking Quaker. He made his living cutting barrel staves. It was Benjamin Franklin inspired Thomas Paine to become a champion of human rights. It just feels like these guys are all woke, almost. Like they're very Marxist. They're very envious. I do understand, that lots of people suffer in this lifetime, but I don't think that these principles that they are setting forth is the answer to, mankind's dilemma of rich and poor and inequality. So Thomas Paine, his writings fanned the flame of patriotism. It has been said of him that he did more to win the independence of the colonies with his pen than George Washington accomplished with a sword. So it was Thomas Paine who assisted Jefferson in writing the Declaration of Independence. There's evidence to say that he composed almost the entire document. The references in the Declaration of Independence to the laws of nature and nature's God especially reflect Paine's theological convictions. So here we are back to nature worship, animism, natural law, almost to Pan territory. I mean, if we're talking about Dionysus and Dionysus artificers, then we are definitely talking about Greek god Pan. So he later published The Rights of Man, The Age of Reason. He held a broad view of religion in general, believing that all faiths were naturally good and were necessary to the spiritual security of humanity. Well, isn't that sweet? He believes in humanism. Surprise, surprise. So there's your Thomas Paine chapter. Let's see. Chapter 17, The Unknown Who Swayed the Signers of the Declaration of Independence. So here is another hooded figure character, and we're going to have to try and go a little bit faster because we're only halfway done. Bear with me here. Faced with the death penalty for high treason, courageous men debated long before they picked up the quill pen to sign the parchment that declared the independence of the colonies from the mother country. For many hours, they had debated in the State House at Philadelphia with the lower chamber doors locked and guarded, when suddenly a voice rang out from the balcony. A burst of eloquence to the keynote. God has given America to be free. Ended with the delegates rushing forward to sign. The American patriots then turned to express their gratitude to the unknown speaker. The speaker was not in the balcony. He was not to be found anywhere. How he entered and left and locked and guarded the room, how he entered and left the locked and guarded room is not known. No one knows to this day who he was. So who is this dude that influenced the people signing the Declaration of Independence to go ahead and do this under, tremendous risk of life and limb? Um, Manly P. Hall says, some years ago while visiting the Theosophical Colony at Ojai, California, an esoteric secretary of the society discussed with me, Manly P. Hall, a number of historical curiosities, which led to the examination of his rare old volume of early American political speeches, of a date earlier than those preserved in the first volumes of the Congressional Record. He made particular mention of a speech by an unknown man at the time of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. So on July 4th, 1776, oh, here's an interesting part. This guy who Manly P. Hall met at the Theosophical Society in California, he went to India. His speech appeared in the Theosophist. The original book is now in the library of the Theosophical Society. So July 4, 1776, in the Old State House in Philadelphia, a group of patriotic men were gathered for the purpose of proclaiming the liberty of America's colonies. If the Revolutionary War failed, every man who signed would suffer huge penalties. And it was, again, that unknown man. He says, suddenly a strong, bold voice sounded. Gibbet, they may stretch our necks. On all the gibbets in the land, they may turn every rock into a scaffold, every tree into a gallows, every home into a grave, and yet the words of that parchment can never die. They may pour our blood on 1,000 scaffolds, and yet from every drop that dies the axe, a new champion of freedom will spring to birth. So you can read this whole speech on your own time, but this is how we got this Declaration of Independence, and nobody knows who was giving these inspiring words. Like I said, he screamed out, God has given America to be free. They all rushed to sign. Delegates turned to express their gratitude. He was not there. No one knows. No one claimed to have seen him before, and there is no mention of him after this single episode. Only his imperishable speech bears witness to his presence. He mentions the all-seeing eye of God. All in all, there is much to indicate that the unknown speaker was one of the agents of the secret order guarding and directing the destiny of America. So one more unknown order of the Questy Man. Now we're getting into it. The Great Seal, the great symbols of the United States. If you don't know what the Great Seal is, it's that circular, one side has the eagle on it and the other side has the pyramid with the all-seeing eye. So the Great Seal has two sides. On the reverse side is the unfinished pyramid to represent the human society itself, imperfect and incomplete. According to Manly P. Hall, the American eagle is actually a phoenix. Selection of the fabulous bird of the ancients seems to have been the intention of the designer of our nation's Great Seal. The phoenix is the symbol of the reborn in wisdom, so it is born again without Christ. The design on the reverse of the Great Seal is even more definitely related to the Order of the Quest. The pyramid and the all-seeing eye represent the universal house surmounted by the radiant emblem of the great architect of the universe. That is the Masonic God. That is not God. These three symbols in combination is more than chance or coincidence. So Manly P. Hall is saying that even the Great Seal are classic symbols of this ancient Order of the Quest. For this seal of the United States of America, several designs were submitted. Most of the designs originally submitted had the phoenix bird on its nest of flames as the central motif. So you should know this is symbolism 101. I don't think symbology, is that even a word? Symbolism 101, Phoenix is regarded as representing immortality and resurrection. It is the alchemical coagulate, dissolve, whatever. What is that? Breaking something down to ashes and then rebuilding it again. Phoenix is symbol of royalty, power, superiority, immortality. It is the same as the Thunderbird of the American Indians. So in China, Egypt, and Greece, the phoenix is a very important symbol. He's saying that this is an ancient symbol of human aspiration towards universal good. He says is represented on the other side, the Great Pyramid of Giza, composed of 13 rows of masonry showing 72 stones. So 72 is a big number in Kabbalism. There are 72 names of God in the Kabbalah. The pyramid without a capstone, and above its upper platform floats a single triangle containing the all-seeing eye surrounded by rays of light. This is the emblem of a Masonic fraternity. He's saying that the Pyramid of Giza was believed to be the ancient tomb of the god Hermes or Thoth, their personification of universal wisdom. That's going to be hard to prove, but he's saying the 72 stones are the 72 arrangements of the Tetragrammaton, or the four-lettered name of God in Hebrew. These four letters can be combined in 72 combinations, resulting what is called the Shem Hem Farash, which represents in turn the laws, powers, and energies of nature by which the perfection of man is achieved. So did you know that that great seal on your dollar bill was so magical? That's why it hasn't changed in all this time. That's why you can get, we get new 20s, new 5s, new 10s, new 100s all the time, but the $1 bill has not changed at all. So it is the universal house of the great architect of the universe. This is getting very Gnostic, going back to Atlantis, a great university, they said was there in the form of an immense pyramid with many galleries and corridors. So even the pyramid, they're saying, is Atlantean. The obverse of the Great Seal has been used by the Department of State since 1782, but the reverse side was not cut at that time because it was regarded as a symbol of a secret society and not the proper device for a sovereign state. It's interesting, its appearance should coincide with great changes affecting democracy in all parts of the world. On the common medium of our currency appeared the eternal emblem of our purpose. The combination of the phoenix, the pyramid, and the all-seeing eye is more than chance or coincidence. And so he's saying, if this is a religious thing, the secret society is, governed by religious ideals, gods of masonry, the all-seeing eye, the grand architect of the universe. And this continent is set apart for the accomplishment of their great work. That means that their idea of democracy is literally a religion, right? Let's see. Let's skip. This is getting too long. Prophetic Dream of General McClellan. Let's skip that one. You can get this book if you're interested in that. So, the end of the quest. In America shall be erected a shrine to universal truth, as here arises the global democratic commonwealth, the true wealth of all mankind, which is designed in the foundation that men should abide together in peace and shall devote their energies to the common cause of discovery. Power of man lies in his dreams, his visions, and his ideals. This has been the common vision of the man's necessity in the secret empire of the Brotherhood of the Quest, consecrated to fulfilling the destiny for which we in America were brought into being. So here he's saying this must be accomplished not in society, but in man itself. Permanent progress results from education. Here again, you can teach people to be virtuous, which that's not exactly true. He says the greater part deals with the intangibles of right motivation and right use. No human being who is moved to action through wrong motivations or misuses the privilege of his times can be regarded as educated regardless of the amount of formal schooling he has received. Um, Here he is again. The Platonic Commonwealth has as its true foundation the unity of learning. Religion is a quest for truth by means of the mystical powers latent in the consciousness of man. Philosophy is a quest for truth by the extension of intellectual powers. Science is a quest for truth by the study of anatomy. These three then, he says, are the order of the quest. All learning would be consecrated to the supreme end that men become as the gods, knowing good and evil. So what are we supposed to take away? That all learning would be consecrated to the supreme end that men become as gods, knowing good and evil. Well, they already did that, and that was called the fall of mankind, and not a good time. So here, is this just another, in my opinion, this is just another way to become a Luciferian. Here we go, talking about the laws of nature. Nature will never change her ways. Let us consider her ways and be wise. Nature and the motions of universal law. He at the end of his stuff, he always like tries to wax like philosophical and like all of this is like so good. But I feel like I just kind of teased out exactly what the point of this is to become as God, knowing good and evil. And that's literally the last, 2 pages of this section of The Secret Destiny of America. So good job. It's fall all over again. Along with Secret Destiny of America is also this little book called America's Assignment with Destiny. I guess I'm kind of tired. Should we do this tomorrow? Or should we power through? Here we are talking about Quetzalcoatl again. Okay, that's interesting. All right, so here's America's Assignment with Destiny. It's a lot of the same stories as Secret Destiny of America. So we'll just like go through this really fast. So here he is again talking about the great plan. Oh, it's so great. But here he says the light of the ancient Vedas is slowly but surely illuminating the whole world. The silent ones of the earth, the priesthoods of the sacerdotal colleges, the hierophants of the mystery schools, and the adepts of the secret societies have been the guardians of man's noblest purpose, the perfection of his own kind. No, that is not true. This is all about enslavement of man through his passions and vices, and one of those being his pride and ego, thinking that you can become as gods. So he says, not so long ago, 90% of the population of the earth was in physical slavery. I don't know where he gets that. 90%, that's kind of high. The democratic institutions must accept the task for which they were fashioned and become the conscious custodians of the democratic destiny. So we just teased out that democracy is a religion. Democracy is a cult. Not that you can't use the ideas of democracy to make things, I don't know, can you? Because there's just so many weaknesses in democracy, and I'm thinking about where we sit right now, how you can manipulate the democratic process to get the outcome that you were wanting anyways. I mean, I said this in the show with Baselit Analyzer. Taylor Swift is democracy in action. I mean, if you don't like her and her music, she's going to be the biggest thing because well, one because of mind control, but all of these people are voting that they want the Swift, right? They want the Biden. And if you can control people's minds, you can make them vote however you want to. They say, Manly P. Hall is saying democracy is the privilege of world guardianship. Even the continuance of the economic theory now demands the strengthening of ethical convictions. Oh, well, that's nice. Chapter 1, Quetzalcoatl. Now we're doing the little appendix book, America's Assignment with Destiny. Quetzalcoatl, also known as Wotan, Kukulkan, Itzama. All three came from a remote region lying eastward, introduced arts, scientists, and founded the religious cults or mysteries in Central America. He is again linking these to secret schools, possibly Atlantean. In a book attributed to Wotan, the Great One declared himself a snake, a descendant of Emos of the line of Chan. He came to America by the command of God from a distant place. He ultimately founded Palenque and built a temple with many subterranean chambers, which he called the House of Darkness. That sounds sweet. There is a legend that Wotan was the grandson of Noah. Now this is getting old and weird. Then you have Itzman. How do you even say that? Itzamna, the father of the Itzas. He is shown rising forth from the mouth of a serpent or a turtle to symbolize he came from the sea. One of the best known of his emblems was the Tau or T-cross. Then he gets into Quetzalcoatl. Now, it's generally admitted that the Quetzalcoatl and the Kukulkan of the Southern Mayas were one person. In each language, the word signifies feathered, plumed, or winged serpent. So that is definitely a dragon. Quetzalcoatl came from the fabled land of the seven colors and established his right at Tula and Cholula. I like Cholula. So Quetzalcoatl was this initiate philosopher. Among the appellations of his priest, prophet, king are he who was born of a virgin, Lord of the winds, and the divine incarnation. Quetzalcoatl was the son of the universal creator God and the virgin Xochiquetzal, and his conception was made known by the ambassador of the god of the Milky Way. So here is another false Christ figure, just like Horus, just like Apollo, taking elements of the nativity and gospel story and rolling them up with a giant serpent dragon, and then you have Quetzalcoatl. So he is described as I guess in his non-serpent form, he's described as a white man with a strong formation of body, broad forehead, large eyes, and a flowing beard. He wore a mitre on his head and was dressed in a long white robe reaching to his feet and covered with a design of red crosses. Apparently, he condemned sacrifices except of fruit and flowers and was known as the god of peace. For when he addressed on the subject of war, he is reported to have stopped his ears with his fingers. That sounds kind of childish to me. He was born on the day of the seven Cains and disappeared and died on the same day, or on the day of one Cain. He was identified with the planet Venus. Well, who else is identified with Venus? Lucifer and Jesus. Says that the hero founded 4 temples. The first of the princes, first for the princes, the second for the people, the third, the house of fear of serpents, and the fourth, the temple of shame. It's getting weird. So why are we talking about Quetzalcoatl in Secret Destiny of America? We're gonna get there in a second. They say Quetzalcoatl created and built houses under the earth, these subterranean and secret places to be chambers of initiation into the mysteries of the cult. The passage was a snake's hole, and Wotan was omitted because he himself was a son of a snake. Quetzalcoatl appeared as the great sorcerer, magician, and necromancer. He performed miracles, and upon his departure, his secrets were entrusted to an order of priests governed by the Hierophant or master. When he died, he announced that he would return at the head of a white-faced man. Quetzalcoatl is credited with the invention of the pictorial or hieroglyphical method of writing. Now they're talking about the old priesthood, which practiced human sacrifice and adhered to a policy of war and destruction, resented the peaceful and gentle faith brought by Quetzalcoatl. In the end, how do you say this? Tezcatlipoca, the personification of the sorcerers, contrived to poison him, and he eventually succumbed to this poison, not immediately, but slowly. When he was about ready to die, the old and weary man called to the sea, and out of the waters came a raft of serpents. He stepped upon the strange craft and was carried away into the land of the sun's beginning. The esoteric rites, the mysteries of the feathered serpents became his cult. There was a historian called Augustus Le Plongeon, known to the Yucatecans as a great black beard man. He was one of the few Americanists who were accepted in the confidence of the Indians. They told him enough to convince him that there were esoteric schools in the Mayan area. The sacred mysteries, writes La Plongeon, have existed in America from times immemorial. There can be no doubt. Some people think that this was the Apostle Thomas. That sounds kind of outlandish. And the Central American Indians came under the Christian or Jewish influence. I don't know about that. Quetzalcoatl, who the Mexicans believed equally to have been a king, a prophet, and a pontiff, should also have been named by them Sayacatl, or the morning star. There you go. There is your Venus again, your Lucifer, and Jesus. He is the light. He is the vine. He was the bread. He was represented as a snake with many heads. Recent excavations would indicate that the cult of the feathered serpent was established before the beginning of the Christian era and did not arise in the 10th or 11th century AD as held by some archaeologists. So Manly P. Hall's saying here that the kings of the Mexican nations, like those of ancient Egypt, were initiates into the state mysteries. Quetzalcoatl created a new religion based upon fasting, penitence, and virtue, and reveal the attributes of the master builder. So that is Masonic right there. Now he is talking about the mysteries of Xibalba. I don't know how you say that. Xibalba, Xibalba. So these shrines and temples are adorned with numerous religious emblems and figures and closely resemble the temples and schools of the esoteric tradition, which were scattered through the Mediterranean countries, North Africa, and Near East. The state mysteries, however, were seldom performed in the sanctuaries of popular worship throughout the jungles, are the ruins of extraordinary buildings constructed for unknown purposes. I think we know what they're for. Okay. The mysteries of Xibalba, as recorded in the Popol Vuh, which is associated with the culture hero Wotan, were given an architectural complex which was said to be an entrance to a mysterious world beyond the dimensions of the material mind. Such gateways existed in the old countries where the mystery religion originally flourished. The buildings usually reveal that they were designed as symbols of the cosmos. So there again, when we talk about Washington, D.C., this is just a continuation of these ancient astrological religions. Popol Vuh, Popol Vuh, Populvuh. It was rediscovered in 1855. The first English translation has remained unknown. It appeared serially in a publication called The Word, a magazine devoted to theosophical and related subjects. I just lost my little light. Now I'm pink. We'll finish it pink. So here's Theosophy again, all wrapped up. In Central American initiations, writing under the pseudonym Aritas, James Priss issued part of the Popol Vuh with learned commentaries under the title The Book of the Azure Veil. The Blue Veil? Azure. This ran in Lucifer, a theosophical magazine between September 1894 and 1895. So they're suggesting that the god Quetzalcoatl was known in Peru under the name Amaru. From the latter name comes our word America. Amaruca is literally translated the land of the plumed serpent. So let's linger on that for a second. Lots of people think America got its name from Amerigo Vespucci, but here Manly P. Hall's saying that the word America comes from the name of Amaru, meaning the land of the plumed serpent. Interesting. So this Popol Vuh consists of a mythology gradually mingling in its descent with the beginnings of history. So it's like the South American, creation story. Opens with a description of creation. Plumed serpent was the creator. They were surrounded with green and blue. Then the word came to speak to them. The logos said, let it be done, let the waters. So it's very parallel to the Genesis creation story, except for God is not a plumed serpent. The heroes of the Popol Vuh were subjected to several ordeals or tests. In some cults, the neophyte was given sacred drugs to intensify his psychic faculties, as in the case of the notorious peyote sect, or was subjugated to hypnotic influence like the followers of the ghost shirt religion. So here again, we're talking about mind-bending cults like Dionysus. The serpent was a wisdom symbol, and when plumed, it meant that wisdom had been given wings and had become spirit wisdom or illumination. They're saying here, they're taking this Bible verse, Manly P. Hall and this author named Pryse, P-R-Y-S-E, suggests that Matthew 10:16 explains the symbolism of the snake bird. Behold, I send you as a sheep, neophyte, into the midst of wolves, profane. Be ye therefore wise as serpents, magicians, and guileless as doves, mystics. That sounds stupid. Yeah, they're saying the Quetzal had the same meaning as dove. Oh, okay, interesting, because Columb is a dove, so Columbus. Yeah. So all of this feathered serpent, this American Indian mysticism, shamanism, definitely. This section is about American Indian mysticism. All of the Aboriginal tribes of North America practice mystical and magical rites and vestiges of an esoteric tradition served by a priestly class. He says, today, older Indians find it difficult to select younger men to perpetuate the sacred initiations. The Indian has always been an individualist. His way of life caused him to turn within himself. The tribal life, with its simple lore, was his only source of cultural tradition. In These tribes, he says, we find distinct esoteric societies. The medicine priests were one of these. A little Indian boy in a highly organized tribal system was initiated into the religion institution of his nation, receiving the lore of the old priests and fragments of tribal history. This included fasting, vigil, and the vigil was done as the most widely practiced religious discipline in the Americas. They would go out alone into some high place, build a campfire, and wait to hear the voices. So shamanism, definitely. Astral projection was one. So these voices instructed them in the herbs of healing, taught them song, dance, brought them news of what was transpiring in different places. They talk about grand old mystics who could astral project. They healed the sick, they protected their tribes, they directed the migrations, they knew where the location of food and water and other necessities. They predicted the future, including rain. They projected themselves to different places and read the minds of their fellow men. They could induce visions. They could receive the impressions of star spirits. And they were proficient in mesmer and hypnotic arts. Some of these American Indian shamans, they are talking about cases where people have witnessed them creating miniature thunderstorms within the room. That sounds crazy. Priests who can change themselves into animals in the presence of spectators. So here we go, spirit walking, right? Spirit walking, or skin walking, I mean, and voodoo. So the American Indian concept of how do you say that? Cosmogogy? Anyways, he's saying it paralleled the Chaldeans, which is super ancient and satanic. They thought that the world consisted of three regions, human beings inhabiting the surface and the central zone. So Middle Earth and Noah's Ark were part of their lore. They had healing secrets. They had superhuman man-like creatures. They frequently considered giants. And the Manitos were a divine invisible tribe, masters of magic to whom human beings could turn to for help and guidance whenever necessity arose. So the giants of North America is a really interesting phenomenon because most of those giant mounds, those burial mounds, those were made for giants, not for normal sized people. And it's my theory that the Smithsonian and others were set up here not to preserve finding dinosaur fossils and stuff like that, but to obscure and keep secret the discovery of giants. So they were very into ancestor worship. They have priests called Manitos. They were usually handsome old men, their faces full of kindness. The lodge was a kind of superphysical senate where all matters of grave import were decided, called the Great Lodge. He's saying all this stuff is identical in principle with the guardian demon described in the works of the Egyptian and Chaldean mysteries. Let's see. Here we're talking about the Thunderbird again, the Phoenix. The Quetzal was identical in meaning with the Phoenix of Asia. Feathered serpent symbolism can be traced back to the hooded Nagas or serpent gods of India and to the winged serpents which occur in the writings and the sculpturing of Egyptian. So now he's saying all of these stratagems were intended to shroud with impenetrable secrecy the mysteries of the brotherhood. With the same motive, the priests formed societies of different grades of illumination only to be entered by those willing to undergo trying ordeals, whose secrets were not to be revealed under the severest penalties. The Algonkins had three such grades, the Wabeno, the Meta, and the Josakid, the last being the highest. To this no white man was ever admitted. All tribes appear to have been controlled by these secret societies. Boom. So even in your nature-loving, pure Indian societies are still controlled by priestcrafts who are doing mystical, weird, changing into animals, astral projecting, taking drugs, shamanism, skinwalking around. All tribes appear to have been controlled by secret societies. So secret societies existed for the perpetuation and enlargement of the choicest knowledge of the tribe. So you can't even get away from this stupid order of the quest as a old-time Native American. Also, they worshipped androgynous things. The androgynous human being, in whom there is a spiritual union of male and female attributes, has been widely accepted as personifying a superior type capable of greater understanding of the father wisdom and mother love potencies of divinity. Such symbolism existed in all the great esoteric orders of the past. So here is another key we just found right here. Key to the mysteries is androgyny. The two, what do they call it? Two spirit? How they like to give credit to this gender mess that we have right now, that Native Americans actually worshipped the two spirit. So that's true. Okay, what else going? Red Hand is Hiram Abiff. So there's a guy named Red Hand. Red Hand was slain by a poison arrow because he would not reveal to his assassin the secret of spiritual power. Oh, okay. So there's a mysterious person who knew all these esoteric secrets, and they called him Red Hand. He is slain just like in the story of Hiram Abiff of the Freemasons. It says, at last the bear came forward and grasping the hand of the martyred hero, raised him by the strong grip of his paw. So over here, it's the bear paw, not the lion's paw. Those acquainted with the ritual of the third degree of the Blue Lodge of Freemasonry will realize this story must have originated among the rituals of the esoteric schools. So here you have another example of Masonic lore coming to America before it was even colonized. Interesting, right? Here, so this probably came out before Secret Destiny of America, because he's repeating a lot of the same stories. He's saying Columbus, the admiral of the oceans, America was actually discovered and to a considerable degree explored more than 1,000 years before the beginning of the Christian era. The true story is in keeping with the mystery schools, past the secret societies of the medieval world, the esoteric orders of Europe and Asia. Plans for the development of the Western Hemisphere were formulated in Alexandria, Mecca, Delhi, and Lhasa long before most European statesmen were aware of the Great Utopian program. The explorers who opened the New World operated from a master plan and were agents of rediscovery rather than discoverers. So does it seem remarkable that no one is certain whether Christopher Columbus was actually an English prince, a Greek nobleman, a Genoese sea captain? Why is it so difficult to ascertain the real name of a man known as Amerigo Vespucci? So Columbus was working, according to Manly P. Hall, under the aegis of these secret societies, either as an individual or as a chosen representative of the secret societies to bring into expression the old utopian ideals and to directionalize them across the seas. That's a weird picture. Lorenzo de' Medici. That could have been Christopher Columbus. Colonization. Yeah, so the colonization scheme, starting with Francis Bacon and the Utopians. He threw his weight of his literary group with the English colonization plan for America in order to prevent Spanish dominations of the New World. The same political considerations apparently also induced him to develop Freemasonry as a further bulwark against the encroachments of the Spanish plot. Now we're talking about Jamestown and the Bermuda Company, Virginia Company. I thought this was funny. They used to have something called hog money, which was a coin that had a definite impression of a hog on it and an identical drawing with the crest of Lord Bacon, even to the jaunty curl of its porcine tail. Hog money was a definite landmark bearing witness to the operations of the secret society directing the early colonization program. So in this brave new world, it is certainly America and not some insignificant island that they are talking about in The Tempest. Prospero is the magician of the new age and an exponent of the Baconian method. Lord Bacon was the moving spirit in the colonization scheme. So if you hate colonism, is that even a word? If you hate the colonization of North America, it is Sir Francis Bacon, who you can take that up with, and the Order of the Quest. Manly P. Hall saying that the two charters of government, which were the beginning of the Constitution, were drawn up by Bacon. There was some trouble in the first colonies. The Virginia Company and Jamestown settlement was a tragic example of short-sightedness and mismanagement. The colonizers were drawn principally from the genteel class and were totally unequipped to carve out their destinies in the wilderness. Descendants of those men who formed the original Baconian society left England and settled in the colony. It was through them the great plan began to operate in America. We already talked about Helpius and the priests of Pennsylvania. Here's some more unusual religious groups that settled in Pennsylvania: Mennonites, Labadists, Dunkers, Nujabornen, the Schwenfelders, and the Moravians. Most of these sects held convictions that could be interpreted as mystical. Yeah, and the Pietists, we talked about those. He says Masons regarded themselves as the responsible custodians of a vast project dedicated by earlier adepts to the emancipation of humanity from ignorance and tyranny. Well, that's sweet of them. Masonry also suggestively successfully bridge many religious differences and discords. The Brethren could practice Christian principles without emphasizing theological differences, thus supplying a spiritual horizon necessary to offset the conflict of sects. Here's some more ecumenism, which is exactly where we're going. Okay, you guys, this is going to get really crazy. In the future, lots of people are going to be converting to Christianity, but it's not going to be a pure Christianity. It's going to be ecumenical. It's going to be rolled up with Catholicism and Islam and whatever. It's going to be very theosophical. It's going to be a mystic Jesus. It's not going to be a true, pure form of Christianity. So watch out for that and be as wise as you can about accepting Christ into the fold of all of the other world religions. I'm not dunking on anyone's conversion. I'm just saying lots of influencers are going to go Christian and then they're going to go one world religion. So Benjamin Franklin was a Quaker and a Mason. He was duly elected Master of the Masons of Philadelphia and was regarded as the first Grand Master of Pennsylvania, possibly by authority derived from the Grand Lodge of London. Here's another story about the professor who was Benjamin Franklin's roommate for a little bit. The professor was apparently in the prime of his life, but referred casually to historical events of the previous century as though he had been present at the time. He carried with him an iron-bound chest filled with rare books and ancient manuscripts. It was noted as remarkable that he was a vegetarian. Yeah, so they're talking about that book, Our Flag Again. And the committee that had been appointed to consider design for the flag. At that time, a gentleman whose name was not mentioned in the reports of the meeting, but was always referred to as a professor, was a guest in the house. He later shared his apartment with Dr. Franklin. The professor dominated the meeting. There can be no doubt from his words that he was associated with esoteric societies. He's the Saint Germain character. Saint Germain is said to not have eaten very much and remained young for centuries. The professor, the unknown gentleman, predicted that the new American nation would soon take its place among the recognized governments of the world. The identity of the professor was never discovered, and there were no further references to him. I don't know if he talks about it in this book, but I say the story all the time about Nicholas Roerich. See if we get there. And if not, we'll just remind y'all how we got that great seal on the dollar bill. George Washington again, Granddaddy Mason, took his first degree in 1752. Freemasons equal revolutionary in France and in America and in South America. As the relations between the colonies became more strained, it was inevitable that the lodge rooms should become council chambers where, protected by obligations of secrecy, men could freely discuss matters which could not possibly be propagated. Here also they could learn that they had staunch supporting brethren in England and on the continent. So this is a Freemasonic revolution. There were actually also lodges of women Freemasons. Of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence, nearly 50 were Masons. Then you have the Spanish Inquisition and the Latin American Patriots. So Ferdinand and Isabella, remembered for their participation and financing of Columbus, were directly responsible for the promotion of the Spanish Inquisition program. They averaged 10,000 executions annually. The majority were accused of heresy. The heretics were the liberals, the progressives, and such as favored the rights of man. That's always their freaking chestnut is, we only want freedom and we just got burned at the stake. I'm not saying it's right to execute people by burning at the stake, but it's like anything that is oppressed is automatically like held up as some kind of virtuous thing. Just because you're oppressed doesn't make you good. Many prominent Latin Americans of the period of the Revolution were educated in Europe or were in contact with enthusiasts returning to their homeland, indoctrinated with the means and the ends of the French Revolution. So you've got the Freemasons backing American Revolution, French Revolution, and also later South American revolutions, people such as Simon Bolivar. All these heroes, liberators of Venezuela, Ecuador, Peru, founder of Bolivia, educated in Europe and Freemason. Miguel Hidalgo. So Benito Pablo Juarez. Juarez became a Mason in his youth. Mexican Freemasonry was consolidated in 1868, Benito Juarez being one of its highest officials. So their whole thing is upset and revolution, and it's never going to be utopia. It's never going to be Atlantis with Neptune as your king. It's just always designed to be, I mean, think of the word revolution. It's just one more turn around the wheel. Manly P. Hall says, when evaluating the esoteric groups of this period, the most reliable guide is their acceptance of the responsibility of the Great Plan, the universal project, the world commonwealth. The plan remains utopian, and the disciple advancing through the grades of a legitimate initiate system is being prepared. P. Hole says, the rise of materialism. The secret societies were concealed from the profane because of materialism. The landmarks are not obvious to the profane, but years of familiarity with the proportions of the project enable the thoughtful to recognize the systematic unfoldment of the great plan. Here he is talking about Great Seal again. He says, once Christianity had rejected paganism, it refused to recognize the esoteric orders of the pre-Christian world. It regarded them as detrimental to its own prestige and sought relentlessly to exterminate them. This was impossible, but the church refused to accept and to teach a universal religion or a universal philosophy. Ecclesiasticism had to reject the mystery system. In doing so, it did not destroy the system, but fortified its own place as an instrument for the fulfillment of the great plan. They will rise again out of the ashes for a universal reformation of mankind. The secret societies are champions of progress through constructive change, but men fear change and doubt progress. Yes, that's why they have to stay underground and secret, because men just don't like it when you do nice things for them and make everything better and great. They're just stupid, profane, unenlightened. They don't get it. They don't. I mean, is this sounding really stupid right now, or am I taking crazy pills? He says, wisdom must be given to a few, that through them it may be taught to the many. Any group which imposes artificial limitations, prejudice, bigotry, or intellectual exclusiveness frustrates the legitimate program of universal enlightenment. The only hope of salvation can be immediately discarded. The great plan has taken on innumerable appearances that meet the requirements of human evolution, but the plan itself is beyond all appearances. This is So dumb. Cooperation is the great work, the social alchemy which produces the universal medicine. And then he ends this section, this little novella about America's assignment of destiny with a Bible verse. He says, oh, and he calls Jesus an initiate. No, not an initiate. He says the initiate Jesus, personifying the great plan, declared its simple rule when he said, he that is not with me is against me. Matthew 17:30. No, just no. Okay, so here we have Manly P holes worshiping all of these crazy kooks, thinking that Platonism and Neoplatonism is the way to go. Communism, if you want to call it that, keeping technology in the hands of the few so that you can have technocracies, you can have oligarchies, you can have all types of exploitative forms of government, but this is just for the best. And just trust the plan, trust the great work, and trust the great plan. That they are doing great things. I mean, Joe Biden, like, he loves humanity, and he's just wanting all of those people flooding the borders to just come and be a part of our utopia here because we can afford it. So that's the secret destiny of America. Next time we're gonna do the secret architecture of Washington, D.C. And then the next one after that on Rockfin is going to be the tyranny of the Federal Reserve. So stay tuned for that. I hope you all had a good time, and I'll see you next